And sorry,
yeah, okay. Recording is started.
Here I go.
All right, you're live. In Common Lisp on Dev.
Great.
All right. I'm this is Corwin back, and I've got screwlisp with me, the host of the Lispy Golfer.
Climate, I like to say. It used to be show.
The Lispy Golfer show, or the Lispy Golfer Climate. And thank you so much for joining us.
Minutes.
Yeah, we've got already a whole pad full of questions, and we have a unique opportunity. If you check out the Etherpad, you'll see some instructions there to join on LambdaMOO, which screwlisp, I'm hoping you will talk to us a little bit about that, as well as your very cool project here.
Oh, yeah. So I main on Lambda, as Corwin is saying. And Corwin was pretending not to know the name of the show, but he has, in fact, appeared on an episode of it in January this year, I think. So he was just pretending there. I'm screwlisp of this. What's happening? 10 minutes or less before we started going live here, they were like, remember how you said you fixed that bug? And then I had to quickly recapitulate my whole talk, and I introduced some new bugs while that was happening. But let's go through some of these questions. So we're all hanging out in LambdaMOO. So if you MX telnet over to lambda.moo.mud.org, port 8888. This is where we're talking at the moment with people like Ed Swarthout, DM and Edudge, who I gossiped about in the show, and Sasha and people were there a little bit as well. I'm just going to read some of the questions that GGXX in LambdaMOO has been relaying to me there, though I hear that there are a whole bunch of them now. So someone asks on the Etherpad, what do you mean when I say the agent is running slowly? Yeah, so if you saw in the talk, I was having the agent only attempt to act every 20 seconds. This is what I mean by the agent is acting slowly. So this is quite different to what people might expect with an AI. If people are talking about like the graphics card ones where you try and crunch as fast as you can for as few seconds as you can, and then you stop. In contrast, my agent is just trying to do a simple action every 20 seconds. But if you keep going continuously at a simple action every 20 seconds without sleeping for days, it still adds up to a lot. So that was the significance of it running slowly. What else are people saying? TGXX to screw tape. Someone asked on the Etherpad, do you think that it would be too hard to add a second way to send commands from Common Lisps to Emacs? No, I put three of them together, and I didn't talk about it because this is a kind of affected choice. Right now, you're using Emacs client for that. That is the simplest way to implement. How about using the Slime protocol? So elsewhere, I am just using the Slime protocol. So in everyone that's Slime connected, so earlier on you saw somebody running a Swank server in Python. Normally you run a Swank server in Common Lisp, and a Swank server is what Emacs Slime, Superior Lisp Interaction Mode for Emacs, connects to. And then Swank comes with Swank, Eval, and Emacs. So after you've been Slime connected, you can trivially send Emacs Lisp forms to Emacs using Swank, Eval, and Emacs. The reason that I chose to use Emacs server and Emacs client was that I was letting the Leonardo agent talk to Emacs using Swank, Eval, and Emacs, and I wanted my ECL image to be using a different notion of a server. So the ECL image, just because I chose to do it like this, is using Emacs client and Emacs server going via, I guess it's executing a program rather than using a shell. Yeah, I was letting somebody else use Slime, Eval, in Emacs. It would have been simpler if everybody just used Slime, Eval, and Emacs. I thought I was getting something out of adding Emacs server into the mix. What's somebody saying? Edudge is weirded out by doing get foo bar instead of get foo quote bar. Yeah, that was Sandwell's choice. He was trying to pitch Lisp to logic notation people, so he lets people put commas in and then ignores them in certain expressions, and he doesn't have these Lisp style quotes. Edudge is obviously from like Schlumberger and wherever else she was at in the kind of Lisp traditions. Full Spain is saying good observation. Edudge is shocked that she's being mentioned. Interestingly, Nosredna Edudge capitalizes Nosredna at the front, but she capitalizes Edudge at the back, just for clarity. You should read her Stanford page or her recipe site or anything if you're not clear on who Edudge is. Sasha, you were looking for the word eclept, I think. She eclept Edudge, I think is the English phrase that you're looking for. Edudge is saying she would not, no matter what I say, she's not going to hug my software agent like she would hug a grandchild. Eyes me warily. And Sasha is not going to, totally not training a general intelligence who requires a lot of data and also cuddles. Okay, so everybody who has children is disagreeing with me quoting Sandwell, who did have children and grandchildren, saying that he wanted machine intelligences to be like his grandchild. GGXX is saying somebody on Etherpad is asking what the Leonardo system is. Sandwell is a Lisp scientist from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties, 10s. With things like bronze statues of him in Sweden. People outside of the Swedish-speaking sphere of science are less familiar with him. I guess he famously taught Robert Strand how to program in Lisp, if that places him for you. What else did he do? Yeah, so he was on a kind of long trajectory of AI, which would now be called good old-fashioned AI. And kind of he was coming from the situation calculus, then like activity calculus kind of direction, which are extended first order logics for reasoning about change over time. And his kind of last program he contributed to the world was this from 2005 to 2014. He worked on this Leonardo system for his master's program. He was teaching at that time at the University of Linköping in Sweden. And then he just kind of gradually faded from view while he wrote his unpublished books on reasoning and change, I guess, between 2010 and 2014. And then I just kind of noticed this eventually, and I brought that software back. And that's what this is, and that's why it kind of weirdly exists. Welcome to Khaki Guest. Magenta Guest is gone. Pink Guest is gone. Blue Guest has arrived. Great. Somebody order 6. Everybody orders sake from Emily. We're hanging out in Jay Lamott's sushi bar in Lambda, which is on the model railway on the table in the second guest bedroom in Lambda House, where we're all hanging out. No, I think GGXX is ordering people up things. You know, just teach people about this. All right, I'm going to try looking at the Etherpad manually.
I'm sorry, I can read you. So the next question you have,
you.
Somebody says, I found Eduardo's blog. What is it? Oh, okay, you just got through that, and then we were also a question you answered is the other one that I see here, just about LambdaMOO, and I think you started to answer in the pad. But if you want to kind of read that out,
I definitely haven't written anything in the pad. Hang on. I'm going to just talk to Khaki Guest in Lambda.
Sure. So while you do that, I'll ramp a little bit and just read this question. The question was, what is LambdaMOO and how do we use it? LambdaMOO is a multi-user dungeon, and you can telnet to it. There's instructions in the pad. I'll go ahead and drop that in the Gen channel or in the Dev channel chat right now. And I see it is already in there, but down at the bottom of the discussion links feedback area, you'll see a set of detailed instructions that screwlisp has provided us to get in there.
I think that was actually GGXX who might have written that for us. Several changes evolved in the last 10 minutes before we went live here. But yeah, so LambdaMOO is the world's longest running virtual reality. I guess it started in the end of October in 1990 and has run continuously to today. You can get there ideally with a MUD client. Technically, it's a MUD, object oriented. This is just where I hang out some degree of the week. Edudge is the wizard. Edudge is also the wizard nos redna of LambdaMOO, for example. It kind of fits into quite Lisp history. I guess Pavel Curtis would have started in 1990 for Xerox PARC originally. Just to go to what Khaki Guest has been continuing to talk about. Welcome to Brown Guest as well, I guess. Khaki Guest says to Screwtape, it seems like you're trying to build a more restrictive Turing test using the input-output logs of an Emacs conversation. Is that accurate? Can you explain this idea of if it is intelligent, I'd like it to be like me. Otherwise, I don't know what intelligence is. Doesn't that seem a little egocentric? Is that a joke or a genuine definition of intelligence? Why do you think the link between input-output of Emacs human input-output is stronger than other forms of Turing tests? So I'm gonna misread Turing test for a moment as Turing complete. And Sandoval's system is very specifically, or first order logic, if we don't extend it, is not Turing complete for starters. It's and things like situation calculus, McCarthy's situation calculus, which I guess is prior to Sandoval's Leonardo calculus, are extended first order logics for reasoning about change. And so they're slightly more restricted than general purpose computer programs. And then what you're saying is, if it's intelligent, I'd expect it to be like me. I'm really just paraphrasing what Sandoval says about, well, he thinks his grandchildren are intelligent. So if a computer is intelligent, he thinks the computer will have to be similar to his grandchildren. This is in contrast to people who are using the terms AI to mean something a graphics card does with extremely specialized bulk matrix multiplication for a very short period of time on absolutely gigantic electrical and kind of memory and computing resources, which doesn't look at all like what Sandoval's grandchildren were doing. And this is why I'm kind of saying, well, if I have an agent, and my agent is quite simple. It uses Emacs server and Emacs client to send lines of basically extended first order logic to the agent, and the agent then takes a kind of first order logic-y action. And I was making the point that this looks more like me computing using kind of REPL-driven development like EEV, where in EEV, I have basically a log of something I've previously done, and I can tap F8 and execute line after line after line. And I think if I see an agent doing that, I can clearly understand and relate to what the agent is doing. So I'm not classifying, like I never do gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of matrix multiplications. So I can't relate to this as an idea of intelligence. Sorry. Welcome to Green Guest teleporting in. Full Spain is saying no one truly knows what intelligence is. All right. I kind of wished that this was working because, so just before we went live, they said, hey, just have your example working quickly. Then I downloaded my example from my blog and I'd like double escaped some characters so that the escape characters would show up in my blog, and I caused a lot of kind of rampant chaos. If anyone else has a question. Guest has said, but. So, great. I guess I could go
I
back and
missed
try
my
and
mark. I probably should have jumped in a couple minutes ago and just said the live stream did cut over, but we're continuing to record this, and the whole session will be published along with the video on the website.
Oh well,
sorry about that. I just lost a couple minutes there and failed to give you the smooth warning.
Oh no, that's fine. I was just kind of rambling. Listen, don't download a web page and try and convert it to an org file on the fly and just before you go live somewhere is the kind of moral here. Idaj is saying that's pretty graphics, but it's long. She's dropping. See you later, Idaj. Yeah, let's all get out of here. Basically, I'm going to go see if I can look at this Etherpad one last time and see if there are any questions, just to not leave anyone out, much to their chagrin, possibly. How to connect to LambdaMOO seems great. Talk, but interesting guides. Somebody wrote that. What do you mean by slowly? Yeah. So I'm saying taking a simple action every 20 seconds. This still adds up to a lot over time. Question: do you think that it would be? Yeah. Well, if you've used Slime and hence you're using Swank, you can just swank a val in Emacs. Would be the more trivial way. Felt like I was getting something bonus by using Emacs server. Somebody has a link to Eduardo's blog, which I think has been misspelled. Should be Angtua with no dot there, .net. # EEV. So Eduardo is the author of EEV mode. I found Eduardo's thing. Oh, this was the question. What is the Leonardo system? Which I just answered. What is LambdaMOO and how to use it? It's a MUD, object oriented. So it's a multi-user dungeon kind of classical video game, still popular, but with extended object oriented facilities. Companies like Harlequin, which Idaj and Ken Pittman, for example, were at, I think, in the 90s. Instead of modernly, you'd have Slack web apps or something. People used to have these MOOs and things. Okay, the music that's replaced me is evidently quite nice. Yes, get the hints. Thanks for being here. Well, let's continue this diatribe possibly on the Mastodon or something like that. We'll do some kind of...
Let me thank you one more time for preparing this talk and for all that you do for the free software community and especially for Emacs. I particularly appreciate
thank you for all you do for the free software community and particularly Emacs, Corbin Bruce. I'm still waiting for a working demo of Dungeon Mode. My joke that I was setting up and never had a chance for was that I was going to say I wanted my agent to be using Dungeon Mode in Emacs. How is that?
Okay, well, we'll work on that. That could be a little side project for the two of us in our copious free time.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, I'll let you go. I'm going to abandon this stream.
All right, I'll end out the recording, and thanks to all who participated.
Okay, see you later.